Greetings, and welcome to an episode of Genre Grinder that is based on a true story. The names have been changed to protect the innocent. With me today is Tyler Foster, who we just heard from in our Best of the Last 25-Year group podcast. How are you, Tyler?
I'm good.
Good. So today, we're going to be talking about unconventional biopics. I want to say that the sort of backstory behind this is that I can't remember the exact thing, but I sort of expressed disinterest in watching the movie Better Man. And that kind of led Tyler and I to some sort of discussion about this kind of stuff. And I let it be known that I don't particularly like biopics. I find them too formulaic. And that sort of brought us around to, well, why don't we watch some unconventional ones? And I think the goal here is sort of to change my mind about the genre, but it might have just been the spark. I don't know if Tyler's actually here to change my mind.
That could be the one that we share. I mean, really, my idea for any podcast is just, what do I want to make you watch?
What do I want to make? Yeah. I mean, that tends to be what. And then I do know you sometimes use it as an excuse to watch something you meant to watch earlier too.
Yes,
which is definitely something I do. So no judgment there. So the question is, what is an unconventional biopic? And the answer is unclear, particularly unclear in this case, I think. So we're kind of playing it a little bit looser. But like,
one thing that we could talk about there is, we went back and forth with a lot of movies, and there are movies like one of the ones that I pitched that I really like is Steve Jobs. But the question is Steve Jobs unconventional enough to be considered an unconventional biopic? I mean, it doesn't. I would certainly say that between the two biopics, even without having seen them, the Ashton Kutcher one that nobody liked, that seems to have been the traditional one. And then Steve Jobs is the Danny Boyle movie. That the one that I like is a little different. It's not, it has this specific structure where everything is condensed into the beginning of these keynote presentations in 3 different time periods. So, I mean, it's a little unconventional, but then, I mean, the nuts and bolts of it is still just performance and the script and stuff. So I can see how that's not quite unconventional enough to be part of this kind of podcast.
If there was like a tier of like 1 to 5, 5 being the least conventional, I think I would probably say Steve Jobs is like a 2.
Yeah, and I think the minimum that you would want is like a 3.
Yeah. So like something, well, for instance, the one I always say that I think the thing I really dislike personally is the sort of cradle to the grave sort of things where you take someone's entire life and you boil it down to 2 hours, 2.5 hours, and it just becomes this sort of series of greatest hits in a person's life. And I just don't think it ever works. And with the one major exception being Spike Lee's Malcolm X, which I think is a fantastic movie and basically the only time that ever worked, for me at least. But usually, yeah, there's something like Dog Day Afternoon isn't considered a biopic, but it is based on a true story biography of a couple people's lives. I think it's when you so the Steve Jobs thing is unconventional, that it's taking sections of time and not doing his entire, like, we don't see him meeting what's the guy? I can't remember the guy's name, so this is pointless. The Wozniak. You don't like see him meeting Wozniak for the first time or anything like that.
Or you don't see them like launching the original Macintosh or things like that. But then it is interesting because when you describe it the way you just described it, it's like, or like cradle to the grave, and then condensing everything into 2 hours. I mean, Steve Jobs is interesting just because it's like, okay, we know that condensing is artifice. So in that way, that movie kind of leans into it a little bit, where it's like it decides that these events were places where you could put this information and it would be relevant.
Yeah, I think a good example of that is the Lincoln movie that Spielberg made, which just takes a very specific time in Lincoln's life. I think that makes a more interesting movie usually for me. There was a list on Letterboxd that I found just by looking for unconventional biopics. Wrote the name down here. Letterboxd user Darren Carver-Balsinger or Balsinger. Yeah. And shout out to Darren. That I found very helpful. As just sort of a way of breaking it down, because it was just there's just too many biopics and I was trying to decide. But also this list included a bunch of animated movies that I wouldn't consider unconventional biopics like Mulan and Anastasia. But I would say that the movie Persepolis, which we almost covered, I think I pitched that one a couple times. That's definitely an unconventional biopic because it does so much with the medium in weird ways. So
it is kind of interesting because it's like Mulan's a musical and stuff, so it is
yeah, it is a musical too.
Divorced from reality. It's not like that's the way it was. Yeah,
and so is Anastasia. Maybe
the parameters.
Maybe
of
my
what
problem is that those aren't real people to me. Those people are too fictional. But anyway, sorry, what were you saying?
I was just saying that the parameters of what is and isn't conventional was a little hard to define. So I think hopefully we tried to pick ones that were that had something very distinct about them.
And there was part of me who wanted to go really get some really early examples, but I also realized that part of the thing I don't like about these movies is that the version of them I don't like really starts in like the mid 80s and becomes a huge thing by the 2000s. Like the 2000s is like the official, early 2000s, the official everybody makes a biopic to get an Oscar nomination kind of era.
What are some, can you
Ray,
think of some notable ones I meant that are like from the 50s and stuff?
Oh crap, I have to find
like just anything that predates your criticism would be like just something that stands out would be interesting.
Well, I was interested in looking at The Color of Pomegranates.
I guess it's not a biopic, but from the 70s, you could come up with like Norma Ray. That's a great movie.
Norma Ray. And Norma Ray is good, but Norma Ray is a great movie that fits in that whole new Hollywood kind of mold, which I guess that would be
basically the same as Dog Day Afternoon, a movie that's more about a historical event than a
They had a handle on it then, and it sort of fell apart. And again, I feel like the early 2000s were the nadir of this.
Would it be maybe Gandhi? Because that was a big movie. That was a big movie
that I find very boring, but I feel like is such an influence on Malcolm X that I can't call it a bad movie.
Right.
Yeah, I mean there's no way you can separate that from Malcolm X. That was definitely something that was on Spike Lee's mind.
I'm just wondering if there is a movie that would be like the movie that would have marked the
turn,
the sea change from what older like movies that are just about an event or a person in that event, and then to be the cradle to the grave thing. And I guess Gandhi just stands out as like a really notable.
It might be
huge Oscar nominations and stuff.
Might be.
Or I guess even before that, you would have Lawrence of Arabia.
I was just about to say Lawrence of Arabia might be the one because that was a huge hit, and like won Oscars and I bet it was somewhere around Lawrence of Arabia. That makes sense. Yeah, so we ended up picking movies. We changed one at the last minute. We were going to have one from the 80s and two from the 2000s and one recent one. We ended up switching around, so we have two from the 80s. They were actually released the same year, which is kind of neat. And there's going to end up being some overlap, we think, based on sort of like our thesis statement we're going for here. I'm not sure what my thesis statement is, but Tyler seems to have sort of an idea of his. So
I don't have a thesis statement, but I guess if we're looking at the subgenre of unconventional biopics, I mean, the thing, like, one of the things that I thought was interesting is like, okay, what was the impetus in each of these four movies for making a biopic that was unconventional? Was there a reason they didn't make a traditional movie? And then also I was thinking about, just basic similarities in the objective, I suppose, or the angle that they took, and like sort of surprising because two of these movies that we picked are about musicians, but those aren't the ones that I would have put together. I would have split them the other way in terms of pairing them up as far as what they're going for. And then, there were some other things that I just thought were interesting about, like, does the unconventional aspect of the movie, does that serve the filmmaker? Does that serve the subject? Does that serve the performances? That kind of thing. So that's most where I was thinking, the things I was thinking about when I was watching these movies.
We also ended up, I just realized, we ended up with one as a biopic of someone who had died very long ago, that was and then one of someone who had just died, and the other two, the subjects are both still alive. So that also plays into your whole how did this story serve them. So let's get into it. So I'm going to cover them in basic release order, but like I said, we might be jumping around. So the first one is Walker from 1987. I'm going to go in and I'm going to do my version of what I got from Wikipedia and shit. You know, not the best actual real story, but this is the true story. Unfortunately, with Walker, I have to do some context. So this is going to be the longest of these 3 true stories. So if you're like, Jesus Christ, Gabe, shut up. This is the only time I'm going to talk this long. So The real story. William Walker was born in Nashville in 1824. He was a child genius who graduated summa cum laude from the University of Nashville at 14, got his medical degree at 19 from the University of Pennsylvania, briefly practiced medicine, he studied law, he learned sign language to impress a woman, he became the co-owner of an anti-slavery newspaper, which is ironic later, fought 3 duels, almost to the death, and while working as the editor of the San Francisco Herald, decided to lead unauthorized military expeditions into Central America in hopes of creating new American colonies. This type of this is the context. This type of expedition was known as a filibuster, unrelated to what we usually call a filibuster, which is a Senate thing. Initially, Walker tried to gain a legal grant from the Mexican government to start a colony, but when he was refused, he went full manifest destiny and led military invasions into Sonora, which is just south of Arizona, and Baja, which is just south of California. He declared himself the president of the Republic of Lower California, which later became Baja. This led him to be indicted for waging an illegal war, but he was acquitted, leaving him free to invade Nicaragua as part of a wider filibuster war. That's where the movie picks up in 1854 during a civil war in the region. Walker circumvents neutrality laws by accepting an invitation from one side of the war to, quote, colonize the area with armed mercenaries. Blah, blah, blah. Walker wins. He is legitimized by the U.S. president in 1856 and reorganized the country by race, with white people being the highest caste. He introduced slavery to the region, and the surrounding nations weren't happy. So the war deepened, and Walker's reign of president of Nicaragua lasted about a year. He was ousted, but decided to fucking return, at which point Honduran government arrested him and sentenced him to death by firing squad. I'm not going to go on that long next time, but that's the context. This filibuster thing, I didn't know the term filibuster. I don't think they actually say the term filibuster in the movie, actually.
I don't think so.
So this is directed by Alex Cox, who is one of my all-time favorite filmmakers, but really just because he made Repo Man, which was a very formative film for me.
Repo Man's amazing.
He also made a more famous biopic, Sid and Nancy. I'm not a very big fan of that movie, but it is a sort of unconventional. It's a conventional in terms of the structure, but it does unconventional things. Yeah, I guess the thing that most people think of in that movie is the part where Sid sings, very badly sings My Way, the Sinatra song, which is very funny of what we're going to talk about at the end of this podcast. Cox is a very political guy, and a lot of his movies were made in reaction to Reagan and Thatcher. From my point of view, the reason this was exciting for me, I haven't watched this movie in forever, to the point where I didn't remember most of it. I had forgotten most of it. I think I watched it on the first DVD that came out. But he is this huge advocate for spaghetti westerns, especially left-wing Zapata westerns. And Zapata westerns are defined as a series of mostly Italian-made movies that take the Mexican Revolution and use it as a backdrop for then modern 1960s Italian politics. Italians also did this with the American Civil War, but those were usually less political. So what I find interesting is that what Cox is doing here is taking a different historical conflict, the Filibuster War, which took place several years before the Mexican Revolution, and using it as a backdrop for the modern 80s American politics, specifically the Iran-Contra conflict. Mm-hmm. And now, poor Tyler still hasn't spoken much yet, but I feel like I have enough listeners that might not know immediately what Iran-Contra is, so I'm going to quickly explain that too. The shortest version is members of Ronald Reagan's staff, including Reagan himself, cooked up a scheme where they illegally sold weapons to Iran in order to fund right-wing anti-Sandinista rebel groups in Nicaragua, known as the Contras. That's where the name of the video game comes from, actually. My parents wouldn't let me play that game because they thought it had something to do with Iran-Contra and not aliens. The third part of the scandal involved U.S. hostages in Lebanon, But yeah, I don't need to go much more complicated than this. This was a very shocking thing to some people, but they totally got away with it. And in a lot of ways, this paved the road for things that are happening literally today in the region. So
Yeah, I wouldn't call Walker particularly Trump-like, but I was really struck by one of the qualities of everything that's going on today is that uh, right wingers just seem to think like whatever they believe is true. It doesn't matter if there's any basis for it. They are just convinced of their own reality, and that is definitely
right.
something that is very prominent in Walker that really reminded me of today. That Walker is just completely convinced of the version of what's going on in front of him that is occurring in his head, and he never deviates from that.
Yeah, and I think that Ed Harris plays Walker, and I think that that was brilliant casting because he was coming off of The Right Stuff, where he played John Glenn, and John Glenn is the most wholesome American in that movie. I don't know what John Glenn was like in real life, but in that movie, Ed Harris's John Glenn is a sweetheart wife guy who defends everybody around him and can't curse. In this movie, he's also a wife guy, but unfortunately for the world, his wife died, and it threw him off his access there. The movie sort of paints his. Actually, she wasn't. They weren't. She wasn't his wife. They were. They were set to be married and never actually married. Ellen Martin was her name, and she was the deaf woman who
Played by
who
Marley
learned sign
Mason.
language. Yeah, who was hot off Children of Lesser God. She won an Oscar for that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a good get for Cox. So we got two really huge name actors at the time. One of which is barely in the movie because her character dies, but the movie does kind of a cool thing where her ghost is sort of haunting him, and that comes up later with the next love he has, sort of also being his conscience that he doesn't listen to.
And there's a lot of it's a great ensemble cast like Peter Boyle, Xander Berkeley.
Well, Peter Boyle is the one, the closest thing to a real inaccuracy. There's a lot of anachronisms in this movie on purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Cox is trying to hammer home that this shit is still happening. So you'll see People Magazine, Newsweek Magazine, Coca-Cola.
Garrett Graham is what I was thinking of.
But yeah, that's actually one of the historical inaccuracies is this movie has a scene where Cornelius Vanderbilt himself speaks to Walker and basically convinces him that he needs to go do this so that the railroads can go through. And there's no evidence that he actually spoke to Cornelius Vanderbilt, but it really fits the whole idea, the anti-capitalist idea of the movie, where American greed is the larger villain, that it allows someone like Walker to run across the continent killing people. I have a note that I said that Walker is so pious that he's contemptible in this. And something that's going to come up in all of these movies is that one of the best conventions of a unconventional biopic is an unreliable narrator. And Ed Harris literally narrates this movie. And he aggrandizes, and Walker aggrandizes himself, but then the events of the film are contradicting what he's saying. So it becomes really surrealistic.
Another thing that is just occurring to me is that I think it probably, to some degree, goes hand in hand that all four of these subjects are not necessarily, like, even within the context of the stories, at least, they're kind of unlikable, or they have more negative qualities. And so I suppose the people who want to make biopics about these kind of people need to feel like they have more freedom than a traditional biopic, which is generally sort of an ego booster, especially if the subject is still living. Like a lot of musicians they make biopics of, those musicians are still around, so they want to look good in their movies. They don't want to look like idiots.
I was going to bring up when we talked about Better Man, but another movie that really, I think, encapsulates what bothers me about these is the movie Straight Outta Compton, which just aggrandizes Dre and Ice Cube because they were producers and makes Easy look like a villain and then erases everybody else's, the other members of the group. One of them doesn't appear at all. And also paves over the fact that Dre was a woman abuser.
Yeah.
It's that movie, but I think that movie pissed me off because I actually knew the sort of mythology of these real people. Whereas a lot of these movies, I don't know anything about these people.
Sure.
So maybe that made it worse for me. I definitely think that, yeah, the thing that makes this movie work for me is that tongue is in its cheek in a way that is so dry that it can only be made by a Brit. And if you look at contemporary reviews, people really didn't like it. And Siskel and Ebert in particular hated it. And I feel like it's because they didn't understand it was supposed to be funny. I might be, projecting onto them there, but I that's the only reason I could see getting that upset about this film.
And it's crazy because it's like it's not a subtle movie. Like it
No,
wears the humor like fairly on the sleeve. It's like really upfront with it. Yeah, the satire and stuff. Like the like after this gunfight near the beginning of the movie where Walker just literally walks through the like
yeah,
he just strolls straight through like because he believes in manifest destiny and he's like this is my calling and I need to do this and it's the right thing to do. And so he just basically blindly walks through this battlefield and all his men are getting killed around him and stuff. And then after that, like, even if that's not enough somehow to get that this is a satire, then they have the scene with the Mexican soldier. I was listening to some of the commentary, and Alex Cox said the actor who played that Mexican soldier came up with that. And Alex Cox was like, okay, let's put it in the movie. So there's a scene where right after this whole massacre where Walker miraculously survives, but like half of his men get killed, and they sort of win by pure luck. I mean, and then there's this guy, this Mexican soldier who's wounded and dying.
Nicaraguan soldier.
Yeah, and he's like, lamenting the fact that people oppose the Americans. Like it's really the irony is really like obvious because Walker is not thinking about any of that. And yeah, it's just flabbergasting that they wouldn't understand that was satirical.
It's really a fantastic scene. There's even a part in the middle where he moves his men into a building and he sits down to play piano while people are bleeding to death around him.
Yes.
And then he arbitrarily decides it's time to leave and he sends the men out to die as a diversion, which to me, the thing is that he wrote down that the men had to do this, but like he's being a coward and he's reframing his cowardness as bravery and strategy.
Yeah, which, I love I forget the exact quote, but he says it in the courtroom at the very beginning, and then he says it again at the end, like as he's making his last stand. It's something about like a man needs to be able to feel that there's something for him to do, something like that. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And through the repetition of that, like the first time, you sort of buy it. Like you know that he's trying to win. Like the first time he says it, he's in court and he's trying to win his case. So it has a little bit of an air of insincerity just because he's trying to win. Like he's puffing himself up a little bit. But when he says it again at the end, like it's really underlined that this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. Like this is absurd.
There's a really good example also of what his words not matching what we're seeing on screen, where he sentences his political rival to death because he doesn't like the way he was originally not going to be president, and then he decides he must be president. He sends him to death, and his quote is, "The entire country celebrated the news. There was no doubt of any kind that justice had been served." To me, that was if you're going to connect him to Trump, which obviously wasn't Alex Cox's real intention, because Donald Trump would have just been another rich asshole to Cox at the time. But that is kind of the kind of thing that Trump would say, where we're visually seeing people crying about this political murder, but he's saying, no, everybody, it was no doubt of any kind.
Which of course is also, on top of all that, not really a political murder. It's framed as a political murder, but he's just doing it because he wants the guy's wife.
Right, and that's the second. So, like, I am not sure if Danya is based on a true person. I couldn't find information, but it doesn't really matter if she is or not. But she is. It's funny because I had written a note early on while I was watching it that said, "This reminds me of Alex Cox's sense of humor. It reminds me of Terry Gilliam's sense of humor, but this also reminds me of Alejandro Jodorowsky's sense of humor." And then right after I think that, we meet Danya, who's played by Blanca Guiara from Santa Sangre. And I think this is her only English language film. And there's this she's great. She's fucking, I don't know, have you seen Santa Sangre?
No, I have not.
Oh, it's fucking awesome.
She is great in this movie.
And I like she's introduced like calling him an asshole, but she speaks. So there's this interesting thing that where he has two women in his life, both of which are better people than he is that are trying to put him on the right, and neither one speaks English.
Well, she
One
does.
speaks
She actually does at the
right.
end.
Eventually, she sort of reveals that she does, but so that feeds into what I'm thinking though, because one of them speaks ASL, and he learned ASL for her, but he's not really listening to her, and the other one keeps speaking to him in Spanish without him acknowledge, and he sort of acknowledges that she said something in that sort of fictional movie way, like like Star Wars, where Han can understand Chewbacca.
Mm-hmm.
And you just think it's that, but then you're like there's a couple times where like, no, he actually doesn't understand her. He asks, what is that word she said when she calls him a pendejo and stuff like that.
And of course, the way he treats Marley Maitland's character is also, it's kind of like his narration, which is like she says something, and then and the only way that anybody who she's talking to is going to understand it is if he translates it, because
Yeah.
he's the only person who speaks ASL, and but he never communicates what she's actually saying. It sort of feels like it ties into his inability to recognize the truth that's right in front of him.
Well, and then when Donya does start speaking English, his first line is, "I don't understand you," and so I feel like that was also a sort of representational thing. Like when she's speaking plainly, he just cannot hear her at all. There was parts in this movie when it was so funny that I was afraid Ed Harris might have not understood that he was in a dark comedy. But then there are other moments you're like, oh no, Ed gets what's going on.
Sure.
Ed understands what's happening.
Of course, anybody who's been online recently, especially because of just the political climate of everything, and then the fact that Weapons is a big awards contender, you see a lot of celebration of the moment during the Oscars where they would not clap for Elia Kazan because he was he named names and stuff. So I think Ed Harris's politics are pretty clear, and that he did understand the movie. And I was, like I said, I was listening to some of the audio commentary while I was working, and they had nothing but praise for Ed Harris and how he would conduct himself on set with the other actors and things like that. So yeah.
He's always, I mean, he was really intense in The Abyss. There's stories about him being a little abusive on The Abyss, but just the fact that he was friends with George Romero, and then when they did the documentary about Creep Show, he came in, even though he was a much bigger star than anybody else in Creep Show. He still came in to do the interview. What is it, Christine?
Wasn't he in the Night?
Yeah, he's in Night Riders. He is the lead. Is the strangest thing as a movie where the leads are Ed Harris and Tom Savini. That would never happen again.
I've seen that movie. I want to, and I've seen the cover.
Yeah, it's very, very. It feels like it's somehow Romero's most personable movie, because it feels like he is making a movie about himself and just reframing his movies as sort of motorcycle jousting nights. Basically, people obsessed with a weird version of the Fantasy Fair or Ren Fair. The best quote in the entire movie that just blew my mind is he's talking, and it's his religious friend. I can't remember the names. Most of the characters are based on real people. And he says the ends justify the means. And well, what are the ends? And he pauses and he says, I can't remember.
Yeah.
Which is just like, it's funny line, and it's also like a really affecting line. Like it made me really feel something to hear that. So I have a little more about the backstory here. I did way more research on this movie than the other ones, and I didn't watch the commentary that you watched because I don't actually own this. I forgot that it was on Blu-ray. I thought it was only on DVD, and I was waiting for a Blu-ray. As I understand, this wasn't a passion project for Cox. He was just like a guy with enough money to be like, I wonder if Nicaragua is as bad as the American press is saying it is. So he just went to the supposed hellscape just to find out. And he made friends with Sandinista fighters. And then he returned to the region to meet with them again. And it was through them that he learned the story about Walker, apparently. Then he put together the whole this is history repeating itself, which again goes back to the whole I don't know, do you remember on the commentary, does he mention the spaghetti westerns at all?
A little bit. I mean, they talk more about the screenwriter Rudy Wurlitzer also wrote Pat Garrett and Billy the Kid for Sam
I didn't know that.
So they talk a lot. They talk more about like what was it like working with Sam Peckinpah, and like, he was talking about there was a scene he tried to put in a scene where they dressed up in drag, and Sam Peckinpah wanted to kill him.
Yeah, Peckinpah is kind of like the ultimate self-loathing, destructive monster to work for.
But yeah. So they talk a lot about that, and they talk a lot about what it was like to work with people down there, and how everybody understood what they were doing because they had like basically lived through it and stuff like that. And so,
the war was ongoing. The Iran-Contra war was happening while they were filming. It was still hadn't finished yet.
Yeah.
Oh.
And also, and then they would integrate things into the movie that like were. I shouldn't tell the story because I don't remember it well enough, but there's a part where there's like a contemporary car that you can see in the movie, and that was just something that the locals would understand, basically. And when they saw it in the movie, they laughed. They thought it was really funny.
Well, apparently he got some funding from the Roman Catholic Church because he convinced them that the movie was going to inspire peace and reconciliation. That I found that factoid online. And then, the movie didn't quite end up, I guess, what they wanted, because there was funding was pulled, which prevented reshoots, and the country's vice president and cultural ministers re-edited the script, and other officials would have visited the set and like slow down the day. 2 people died in auto accidents during filming, which wasn't like his fault. It was a real accident, but and there was a war ongoing, so this was a very hard movie to make.
Yeah, they did talk about how Peter Boyle was too nervous to actually travel down there, and they cast somebody else. But then it didn't work out for some reason, so they went back to Boyle when they could shoot his part of the movie in America, and Boyle did the movie for free.
That's a perfect segue for me, Tyler, because do you know where they filmed Boyle's scenes?
They told me, and I just don't remember.
It is Tucson, Arizona.
I should have guessed. I should have known.
I think we've this is an in joke if people have listened to multiple of this is something Tyler and I have done forever. I don't even remember why it started, where I have to mention every movie that was shot in my hometown of Tucson to him, and so I've started to.
It's literally just because I'm a fan of Romeo and Michelle.
That's right, Romeo and Michelle, and my mom's school was near the school where they filmed it. But yeah, so we done Can't Buy Me Love was shot in Tucson. And then the last time we did The Girl in the Red Truck, Charlie Brown.
Yes.
What's really funny is the scenes with the train and Peter Boyle in this movie. They're not, from what I can tell, the mountain ranges are pretty easy to like figure out. I'm pretty sure those scenes were shot very close to where Uncle Spike or Spike, not his uncle, his brother, Snoopy's brother Spike lives in a cactus. It's the same part just outside of town. So that's a fun little connection between this very artsy, fantastic Alex Cox Hollywood film and The Girl in the Red Truck, Charlie Brown, straight to video, very strange half movie.
Starring somebody's daughter, right?
It was his daughter. It was
Charles
Schultz's daughter, and it was co-written by his son. Yeah, but Sonora, where Walker would have been, is part of the Sonoran Desert, and Tucson has the Sonoran Desert, so it's a really good doubling. And they shot a couple scenes in Old Tucson, which has the streets already set up for him, so it makes sense. The fact that I had read and I had heard this years ago, and I looked it up, and apparently it was true. Cox was born in Liverpool. But he was made an honorary citizen of Tucson while making the film. And I think that parts of Straight to Hell, his other Western, were also shot in Tucson, but that doesn't show up on the IMDb, so I'm not positive. But I think they shot some of that at Old Tucson too. That is not a biopic. That is a sort of punk rock Western. Perhaps a little too much. It's remember having Courtney Cox.
Courtney Love.
Or Courtney Cox. Courtney Cox.
And
maybe Courtney Cox is in it, but yeah, Courtney Love.
And from that brief time when Alex Cox and Courtney Love were married to each other. And Joe Strummer, Jim...
Yeah, Strummer does the soundtrack to Walker. And it's kind of interesting. It's kind of interesting that he goes with a sort of Spanish guitar thing. It was, Joe Strummer of The Clash. So yeah, the supporting cast here. Richard Mauser is the one I was thinking of, who's from The Fly. He's the other man in The Fly.
No, I think you're thinking. Well, the guy in The Fly is John Getz.
Oh,
John
fuck, that's
Getz.
John Getz. I'm going to
John,
cut that out and
John,
pretend I didn't make that mistake.
John Getz is from Blood Simple.
Renee Auberjonois has a very funny Belgian accent in this.
Yes, and he like one of the many characters where you're just like, why does this guy even stick around? Like nobody ever listens to him.
But apparently he did in real life. Oh yeah, and Xander Berkeley is in this, who I actually also confuse. I just confused Mr. Mauser. Yeah, I confused all three of those actors with each other. Garrett Graham,
like the thing. He's the dog. Yeah, he's the dog guy.
The dog guy, who I confuse with those other two actors sometimes. Then there's two Cox regulars, Miguel Sandoval, who's in, I think, almost all his movies at this time. Cy Richardson and Dick Rude.
Isn't there also there's a guy who dies. He gets like shot in the face and he falls right in a casket. I think he was in Repo Man too.
I think that's Dick Rude, isn't it?
No, because Dick Rude's a white guy, isn't he? Yeah, Dick
Rude,
yeah,
he is.
Dick Rude basically looks like Dominic Monaghan.
Oh, right. And then Cy Richardson's a big black guy.
I know who Cy Richardson is. Cy Richardson is like his right-hand man.
Yeah. And when he decides to reopen slavery, there's a pretty... the one black guy in his group obviously objects. I have a feeling that he didn't have a black guy in his group in real life, but it was still... it was really...
No, I mean, it might not have been, like a right-hand man kind of guy, but he had a lot of black guys with him because that was mentioned in the commentary that, because it's important in the movie and it's important in reality that he betrayed them, that he decides to introduce slavery to Nicaragua.
I mean, in the context of the movie, that's his real downfall. Like up until that point, he's kind of just getting lucky and making it through. Yeah, there's a brief shot during the final kind of massacre, which is this sort of descent into hell sequence. It looks really expensive. I imagine that was Universal was not happy when they saw that scene, and this horrifying, very expensive looking scene with all these slow motion Sam Peckinpah shots. But there's a shot where Walker appears to eat human flesh.
Yes.
And nobody says anything about it. I thought that was like a great little, like, horrifying touch.
Another guy that I like in this movie is Richard Edson from Do the Right Thing and Stranger Than Paradise.
Is he the one who's also... He's not in The Crow. That's not him. He's in Ferris Bueller. Ferris Bueller's the other thing I know him from.
He's, of course, also in the great Super Mario Brothers movie.
Right. The fantastic.
The important
good one.
Yeah.
The good one that with the not so not surprisingly, this esoteric bummer of a movie that was critical of Reagan and the U.S. at a time when people were still quite fond of Reagan and jingoism in general. This was a box office failure and effectively ended Cox's mainstream career. And he thinks it was a blessing in disguise because he wasn't really comfortable making those, studio movies anyway.
When I'm actually looking at the list on IMDb, I'm seeing a lot of little roles for Cox regulars that I recognize from other movies. Like I guess the DA probably in that early courtroom scene is Fox Harris, which is the scientist guy who dies of radiation.
Right. Yeah. Right.
And I see
some of my best friends have had lobotomies.
I see Del Zamora listed, which I believe he's one of the he's like a priest, and I think the two characters that I'm thinking of from Repo Man, it's the other Repo Man, like the competitors, because it's the guy who gets,
that they chase.
Ryan Walker, who gets shot in the face and he falls in the casket, and then there's a priest, and I think that's the other brother.
The one clip of this, I think you would show somebody, like if this had been, how there's always the Oscar clip, the clip that you show. I think the clip you'd show from this one is where one of Walker's men, I don't remember the character's name, but he's played by, and I'm going to fuck this name up because it's Polish, Keith Sarabaka. He quietly confides in Walker that he can't tell the difference between the liberal and conservative Nicaraguans. And Walker says, don't worry about that. You can just be assured that our side is the righteous one.
And it's he that's the same guy who doesn't he die in the next scene, and there's a little conversation between them. Yeah, which is
Yeah.
also another great scene.
Like I said, I'm not a huge fan of Sid and Nancy, and Straight to Hell is kind of, some of the later Cox movies I just didn't really like very much. So I'd always been like, he's one of my favorite filmmakers, even though he only made one movie I really love. Now he made two movies I really love. I can say that now with assurance. So that was the one I had the most notes on. So hopefully we can move a little faster now. And I'm sorry about that. So the next one, this was shot in 85, but unofficially released in 1987. It's a Superstar, the Karen Carpenter Story. The true story, I'm going to be much shorter this time. Karen Carpenter was born in 1950 in New Haven, Connecticut. Her birthday was actually just a couple days ago. The granddaughter of missionaries. Her older brother, Richard, was a musical prodigy. And while she took an interest in dancing and baseball, she later developed an interest in drumming while performing in her high school band. They realized that Richard couldn't sing and she could. And so she was sort of like drafted into his group, which was originally called the Dick Carpenter Trio, later called the Carpenters. The Carpenters rose to prominence at the end of the 60s and became major superstars, and Karen even had a semi-successful solo career. Her personal life was complicated. Her first marriage crumbled after her husband refused to reverse his vasectomy, and her conservative values meant she clashed with some contemporaries. And sadly, her battles with the eating disorder often overshadow any of her musical accomplishments. And I should say, she is a really good drummer. And there is something really special about this poor like victim of femininity in the 70s and early 80s. The fact that she did this thing that the male activity of drumming. There's still not very many female drummers, and there's not a lot of drummers that sing, like Phil Collins, Don Henley, and just like them, she eventually just sort of moved to the front and would only drum a couple times. But eventually, she died of officially, I think she died of a heart attack due to complications from anorexia nervosa. This was directed by Todd Haynes, and the movie that put him on the map. And when we started this, I'm like, I haven't seen that many Todd Haynes movies. And then I looked, and I've seen most of his movies. I just hadn't seen Safe or Far From Heaven, and I felt like, I must not have seen a lot.
You even saw what's it called, Wonder or something?
No, I didn't see that one either. I didn't know that one existed until I just looked it up. Honestly, had never heard of that movie. And I think I even watched his Mildred, whatever that his TV show is called. Mm-hmm. But he did two other unconventional biopics that we could have very well covered: Velvet Goldmine and I'm Not There.
Yes.
I think we definitely talked about I'm Not There. I'm glad we covered this one because I really enjoyed this.
Yes, I thought this was pretty great.
This is probably the most unconventional biopic we're covering here.
The only thing that was frustrating is, of course, that since this was never officially released, it doesn't look very good, and you really wish that you could have the complete visual fidelity to see all the details that are in there, especially when they put text on the screen, which is, unfortunately, it's black most of the time.
And black and anything dark. You can't read it.
Yeah. So, but it is a great film. And I do think that, just to step back to Walker for a second, I mean, Walker feels like, okay, this is a movie where the unconventional nature of the movie comes completely from the filmmaker. Like, the story is sort of unconventional, but the reason the movie is the way it is entirely down to Alex Cox.
Yeah, you can do a conventional version of Walker's story very easily. He had an interesting life. He was a child prodigy who graduated summa cum laude at 14.
and also, I mean, if you were, for whatever reason, since he was a terrible person, if you were for whatever reason invested in a Walker biopic that was actually straightforward, in this case, the unconventional nature of the movie is actually designed to make him like underline how crazy he was and like wrong. So that is definitely not serving the subject in any way. It's serving It's all coming from how Alex Cox sees this guy. So
yeah, he doesn't have a tragic downfall as much as is an asshole constantly throughout the film.
So Superstar is interesting because it feels like, on one hand, I do think that there's clearly an element to which this was a practical way to make the film. Like, this is a choice that is creative, but it also like saves the money on locations, and it makes things easier for this movie that this film that they're trying to do. But I do think it also feels like a great commentary, like to use Barbie dolls to
the whole movie well, not the whole movie. Very large swaths of the movie are told via these off-brand Barbie dolls that they have. Apparently, was shot in 10 days at Bard College. Haynes personally made all the miniature sets, and all the dolls' costumes were made by Gina Guerin. And they intercut that with like stock footage, and then some of their, I'm guessing, classmates were doing sort of fictionalized interviews about the subject, because it's sort of set up like halfway between a biopic and a documentary, a docudrama, I guess is how you'd say it.
It does operate at a bit of like a bit more of a remove. There's never a question that we are sort of like peering into a snow globe to see this thing in the past, basically. And I think that the thing that stands out to me is like, I mean, it's a close call. I do think that ultimately I would lean towards Superstar just because I think that Better Man has a great advantage in being a studio movie and having a great, like a big budget and all these resources going for it. But I do think Superstar, in terms of the unconventional approach to the subject, I do think that the filmmaking here is probably the most effective of all the films we watch, just because even though they are dolls, like the thing that really stood out to me watching it is how much it hit me on a human, like a level. Like I really felt like more conscious of like body things, and it just seemed really like the way in which she was harming herself seemed somehow more potent, even though it's a toy that I'm actually looking at. And so I thought that was really striking about Superstar.
Yeah. Well, it's something that happens to me with animated movies. I'm not likely to cry in watching live action films, even if they're moving me. But for some reason, if an animated film moves me, I will weep. And I can't really explain why, but I think it's part of the artifice. It has something to do with it. And in this case, it's scarier because of the way it's done. It feels like he very purposely is making some of the scenes feel like a horror movie. They're supposed to be scary, but even the mundane scenes become sort of like a horror movie.
Yeah, there's just this creeping sense of dread through the whole thing.
So as I watched this movie, I made my notes, and then just today, a couple hours before we did this, YouTube suggested I watch a video from the channel Be Kind Rewind, which is a channel I was already into, because she covers a lot of old Hollywood stuff. So I just watched it, and it's really well done. And she did her own reenactments with Barbie dolls and sort of structured the whole video essay like the movie. And I just feel like, and even though I made all these notes, I feel like I wasted my time, and I should have just watched this video and just made notes off this video. For one thing I learned from that is that the inspiration behind the aesthetic was based specifically on a Barbie ad from the 50s that mixed dolls with footage of real children that Haynes had seen, and that that's something about that combination was really striking to him. The movie itself is and I feel like this overshadows it a bit, but it is technically a banned film. It wasn't designed for major release. It was a college film, but it had a little art house kind of festival, kind of queer community hit. Apparently there was a Carpenter's drag show that they showed it at. Richard Carpenter saw it at some point, and it really pissed him off. And I'm not surprised, because it's kind of morbid and he's an asshole in it. But he couldn't get it taken away. He couldn't get it shut down, except for the fact that Haynes didn't get the rights to all the music. And he uses Carpenter's music and Elton John music and some other songs. And I was thinking that sounded crazy to me, that how could you not know that? But it seems like he really thought that it was going to be covered under fair use, and that he actually was more afraid of being sued by Mattel. And so he actually went out of his way to make sure that they said that Mattel has nothing to do with this, and these aren't technically Barbies. These are off-brand Barbies, and we've taken them apart and done stuff to them. So this is all covered under free use. And he didn't know that musical free use, we're talking 1985 to 87. It's gotten even worse than that now, where, you have machines that if you put a video on YouTube will figure out you're using some song you're not supposed to use and shut you down. So it seems like a crazy thing to make this movie and have all this music and not think that you were going to get in trouble for it. I think he also thought he wasn't planning on making money off of it, but that's just not the way it works. So, yeah.
But yeah, it's mostly just a shame that there's no higher quality copy of it, even if it's not something that you can, you know, get on DVD or something. Like it doesn't have to have an official release, but it would be nice to see it in a better quality version.
The thing that Be Kind Rewind says is that she figured out there is a clause where he's allowed to show it as part of his larger oeuvre. Uh-huh. So if he ever comes to town, I don't know if Seattle ever gets these kinds of repertory showings, but if he ever comes to town to show any of his short films, they won't list it, but it will be included. And it was remastered in 16. Nice. The 16 millimeter was remastered. So there is a version of it out there. It's just you only can get access to it kind of by assuming it's going to be somewhere.
Which then again, maybe some of the limited visual quality also adds to the horror aspect of it.
Yeah, and people have. I mean, that's something that. Well, okay, so I'm interested in the video nasties phenomenon. I don't know if you know. I mean, I'm sure you know what it is, but I don't know if you've ever tried to watch the video nasties.
Not really, no.
So the thing is that the video nasties, the thing that's really remarkable about them is maybe these, I don't know, I think if you add them all up, there's 39 movies, but then there's a second list. So there's probably almost 60 movies. I would say maybe 5 of them are genuinely shocking, like Cannibal Holocaust. Cannibal Holocaust, I understand banning Cannibal Holocaust, but most of them are these lame, low-budget pieces of crap that someone at the BBFC said, ugh, nope, kids can't watch this. And so the fact that they were banned and you had to get bootleg copies of them and third, fourth, fifth generation VHS tapes look really bad. And so people would watch these garbage movies and go, oh my God, this is the scariest thing I've ever seen. And then they get released on DVD and Blu-ray years later and they're all cleaned up and everybody's like, oh no, this is garbage. Whoa, this is actually really boring and looks bad. So there is a question of that, is if Superstar will work for all the fans without looking kind of like garbage. Like,
I mean, this one I think is it's safe because it's not like the reason that it's compelling is that things are left to your imagination. I find the film is very effective at conveying the way in which this disease is eating away at her. I also like that, the idea to use the dolls like reflects some sort of thematic quality about this person, and it also seems to fit in with the the kitschy quality that and camp stuff that would be of interest to somebody like Todd Haynes. So I just think that it's a really good, like, in terms of being unconventional, it all feels like that all fits into it all flows together really well. Like all these elements are the right fit for each other and for this project. And so that's one of the things that's most compelling about it to me.
Yeah, I mean, Karen Carpenter is sort of in a situation of performative femininity, and she is losing weight to probably the Barbie dolls. There's the whole, it's not a discussion I want to go one way or the other on, but the idea that Barbie dolls give unrealistic expectations of body shape and size for young girls. Yeah, I
also think Barbie is, no matter how far away we get from it, I do think that Barbie also carries a 60s, like there's a little bit of like 60s, like just sort of attached to the idea of Barbie. It's like there's a little bit of retrograde there, and I do think again that fits with the period that in which these things were happening to Karen Carpenter. So yeah, just another way that all like feels like it feeds into each other in the way that you want it to.
I went into the movie and started the movie thinking it was going to be more of a sort of satire and more, because it has the camp thing going on and it has the punk rock thing going on, but it like is genuinely informative about anorexia. Yeah, to the point where I started questioning. I was born in 1980. When did I know what anorexia was? And I feel like it was well into my childhood, like maybe in almost the 90s, the late 80s. And I was trying to think, well, who's the first person I knew who had anorexia? It was Karen Carpenter. That was the first person I could think of. I was like, I think there's a sitcom actress, but I couldn't find one. I looked up 80s sitcom actress anorexia. The only thing I got was Christina Applegate, who I never watched.
Maybe it was I seem to recall Tracy Gold from Growing Pains.
That was probably it. Yes, that was probably it. Tracy Gold from Growing Pains. Yeah. So that would have been something that would have been on, because I remember that. And then there was another sitcom actress who was murdered by a stalker. And so those were two events that made sitcoms sort of scary to me as a kid. But I honestly don't know how much. I don't remember us learning about anorexia in like sex ed, because the late 80s, early 90s is when they started having sex ed classes, and they talked about a lot of stuff like that, but that never came up. I don't.
I was mid 90s in that. I'm a little younger than you, but
Yeah.
I remember learning about anorexia in school.
Yeah, I don't. I'm trying to, and I think it really was the Karen Carpenter side. So obviously hadn't seen this movie. There was a 1989 movie called The Karen Carpenter Story, which Richard Carpenter participated with. Apparently he hated it after the fact, but it was much more in line with what you expect. It was a made-for-TV CBS movie directed by Joseph Sargent. There's some creepy behind-the-scenes things where they made the actress Cynthia Gibb wear Karen Carpenter's actual clothes. And when she's taken away in the ambulance, they had the actual guys who took her away in the ambulance reprise their roles as the gurney men. And then there's stories about how everybody hated Richard Carpenter and wanted him off the set. But that feels like the kind of movie this movie was making fun of, but it came first. But I don't think I ever saw that either. But for whatever reason, Karen Carpenter and anorexia were the things I understood. That was what I understood about anorexia. So the more I watched this movie, the more I'm like, this is actually sort of educational. I don't think people know this stuff that well at the time.
Yeah, it's just a surprisingly effective. I found it by the time it got to the end, and there's that great POV shot of her taking the ipecac out. I found that really harrowing, and I was like, it's surprising how this is interesting in that it is the only one of these that seems to. It is unconventional, but what it's going for is sincere. There's no irony to its approach, which is interesting.
It's part of me was thinking that I bet John Waters loves this movie, but that he wouldn't have made this movie. It has that sort of acrid. It's sort of offensive because this is someone's real life and you're doing it with Barbie dolls. There's something mean-spirited about that. But at the same time, just like John Waters, Haynes really cares about her. And John Waters' whole thing is he has these horrible, disgusting people that he cares about. And that's the appeal of his movies in a lot of ways. So I just kept, I know Andy Warhol would have liked this, but he died just before it finally got released. So I guess we can't talk about him, but I kept on thinking, I bet John Waters likes this. I guess I could have done a web search that might have come up, and then they also said something about how they were using the biopic formula. And I was like, was that really established yet? And so I looked it up, and there were actually quite a few 70s. I think the 70s might have become the year. We were just talking about this, but for musical biopics in particular, there's the Bette Midler movie, The Rose, 1979. There's Lady Sings the Blues, where Diana Ross plays Billie Holiday from 1972. There's one I did remember, The Buddy Holly Story from 1979. And Coal Miner's Daughter, which won awards in 1980.
Sparkle, maybe? Was that
what?
Sparkle? That's it's just come to mind as another movie that might have been in that period.
Yeah, and then after this movie, you get La Bamba, Great Balls of Fire, Sid and Nancy. Those are the movies I was remembering.
What's Love Got to Do with it?
What's Love Got to Do with it? So I guess, the Cradle to the Grave thing. But Coal Miner's Daughter is almost a Cradle to the Grave thing. So maybe it does start before Gandhi. I think that Lawrence of Arabia is a pretty good starting point if we're going to go back to that, but that's obviously a very different movie.
What about? Maybe you would say that was this, the Streisand Star Is Born. That's not a real musician, but was that a big hit?
That was a hit. Yeah, it was the second time. There's three versions. There was an older version of it.
Well, yeah, but I'm just saying
that was a hit.
That was a movie that predates stuff like Coal Miner's Daughter that would have influenced this trend of musical biopics. I was just trying to think about it.
Yeah, I think it's Lady Sings the Blues and Well, you got both Buddy Holly story and The Rose. The Rose was also a really big hit. You got The Rose, Buddy Holly story, and Coal Miner's Daughter within months of each other.
Okay.
But Lady Sings the Blues, I've never seen Lady Sings the Blues, so I don't know how much it actually fits the formula. I remember it being considered kind of a trashy movie by some critics, but I don't know anything really about it.
I feel like recently it's been reappraised because I get the sense that it has a respect now. Then, of course, right around that time, you should know what I'm going to say.
No, what?
Purple Rain.
Oh, yeah, of course. The other place I live. Yeah. Yes, Purple Rain, which is... I kind of counts as an unconventional biopic because it's a fictionalized version of a true story.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's fictionalized enough. It's almost like...
I mean, I would think that doesn't count because I never would have suggested 8 Mile, and 8 Mile is the same thing.
Yeah.
Where they turn him into somebody else, but it's basically him.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Or The Fablemans, which I watched.
Yeah, which I haven't seen that.
Pretty good. I thought it was really good. Anyway... was that all you had to say about Superstar?
Well, and I was just going to say, this movie is just over 40 minutes, which is almost exactly the length you can do this concept without it becoming too long. Like, it's perfect. It's like 43 minutes, I think, total.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to really go over what was wrong with this one, just because a lot of it was mythologized because people didn't know. And the parts about anorexia are accurate to at least what they knew at the time about anorexia.
Mm-hmm.
So, all right. So then move on to 2008 and Bronson. The true story. Charles Bronson was born Michael Gordon Peterson in Belfordshire, England. Despite his supposedly pleasant childhood and good parenting, Charles became a juvenile delinquent, a brawler, and a petty criminal. Found himself in prison and struggled to stay out of prison for his entire life. He was, or rather is, clearly mentally ill in some way. So he also spent time in a mental institution, but it went even worse. And he eventually sort of became a career prisoner, despite never being charged with something that would normally lead to a life sentence, like murder or rape. He changed his name from Michael Peterson to Charles Bronson on advice from a fight promoter when he was out of prison doing illegal bare-knuckle boxing in the mid-'80s. He claimed to have never seen a Charles Bronson movie. He's still in prison. He's still around. This is directed by Nicolas Winding Refn. And I know that he had made the Pusher movies had some success, and he had his first Hollywood failure in Fear X. But a big part of me, this is the movie that brought Refn to my attention. I'd heard of Pusher and the Pusher trilogy, but I feel like this is the thing that sort of made him a viable commodity in Hollywood, was this movie, the reaction to this movie.
Well, it's funny that on the Superstar thing, you said this is about the amount of time that it could sustain itself before running out of room. And I don't know. I haven't heard yet what you thought of Better Man. You don't tell me yet because I want to find out when we get there. But this might be the one that is the most contentious between us. For about 40 minutes, I thought this was really good. I mean, even though the Clockwork Orange quality to it was very obvious, I still thought it was a good evocation of Clockwork Orange. Yeah. And then I just sort of lost track of what it was trying to say about this guy, or if there was even anything coherent to say about this guy. So I struggled with this one a little. I did think that one thing that is absolutely certain that I'm sure we both agree on is that it's a monumental performance by Tom Hardy. Yes. I really think this is probably, even though I love, Fury Road and stuff, I think, and I haven't seen all of his movies, there's probably something else that he's great in that might be a good contender, but this has to be up there as one of his best performances, that he's just so good throughout the entire movie and so committed.
Well, I say that this is the movie that brought Refn to a lot of people's attention. This is 100% the movie that brought him to everyone's attention. If you go, he had been around, obviously.
I did remember that. I did remember reading a review. I've always remembered reading a review of Rock and Rolla. Unfortunately, I read it on Cool News, but whoever wrote that review did single out Tom Hardy. That was in 2008. That was the first time I heard of him. I did like him in the movie, but he didn't really make that much of an impression. But then I saw.
I'd seen Black Hawk Down. I'd seen Star Trek Nemesis. I'd seen Layer Cake. I'd seen Band of Brothers, and none of these stuck with me. I don't even remember who he was in anything except for Star Trek Nemesis, because he plays the weird young clone of Picard, and I just remember thinking that's not really, he doesn't really look like Patrick Stewart. And that's just a very awful movie. That's like that, you have to be so bad to be the worst Star Trek movie, and I think Star Trek Nemesis is that bad. But yeah, he kind of disappeared. And so after this movie, he starts making movies where he has a funny accent and is a kind of weird strongman guy. So it's like, I don't know, maybe he did a funny voice in Rock and Roll and I just forgot about it, but that kind of became his go-to after this movie.
I remember him being pretty normal in Rock and Roll.
Yeah, I think so too. I think that he was trying to play up being pretty in that point in his career. He's a really attractive guy, and then like he sort of found more.
I do think that Rock and Roll, the Guy Ritchie aesthetic is in the realm of Bronson. It's more Bronson than.
Well, that's something I actually want to bring up. So, to me, this is somewhat outside of Nicolas Refn's. What you think of. You think of Drive. This is different than that. It's not the slow, cool guy cinema that is. Like you said, you had a problem with the pacing, but it's not a slow cinema kind of movie. It's not like
Only Lovers Left Alive, or no, what's it called?
Only God Forgives.
Yeah, that.
Yeah. And so I really like Drive, Only God Forgives. I love Neon Demon. I really liked the series he had on Netflix, Copenhagen Cowboy. I don't really like the Pusher movies. I think they're sort of just kind of leftover Tarantino pastiches. The third one's pretty good. I think Bleeder is a genuinely bad movie. But this movie, you get his sort of obsessions with masculinity, and you get some of the extreme lighting gels that he uses, and the electronic 80s music. There's Pet Shop Boys and New Order in this movie. And I can't remember who does the This Is Red, Red, Red theme song, but I don't know if that's an original or not, but I didn't write that down. But so I was having this conversation with Patrick Rapol, who does not really like Nicolas Refn movies, but likes this movie. And the thing I kind of came up with is that this movie is different from those movies because it's about a person, where those movies are about archetypes. Like the characters in those movies don't have like what is the Drive guy's personality? It's that he drives a car real well and wears a cool jacket. And that's fine by me. I like that movie, but this movie is about a human being interacting with other human beings, and so it has a much more it has a realism to it. It's also really grainy and gritty on purpose. I think that's the part
not only that, and not to interrupt you, but not only that, but because Bronson is such a crazy person, there needs to be an awareness of like what is normal versus what is he.
Yeah, because it's all from his point of view. Yeah. Which is really the thing that makes it the most unconventional. Again, he narrates, and the coolest thing in the movie is that we get a sort of vision of this theater in his mind where he's telling his story to people. And those are the Oscar moments in this movie for like if he would have gotten nominated, you would have shown the scene where Hardy has a discussion with himself, and one side of his face is painted like a woman and the other side is Bronson. It's a gimmick, but it's so well done. It's so good.
In my opinion, I would say it goes on a little long, but his performance is so good that you're just like, okay, whatever. I get it. I get why you would indulge this, because he's good. He's great.
I think it's also, unlike a lot of Refn's movies, this movie is outwardly funny. That funny things happen in it. The characters are weird in a funny way. Whereas I think a lot of Refn movies, I think he thinks they're funny, but they're so static and sort of artificial that I don't think they play as funny to other people.
I don't really remember any notable like laughs in Drive.
No, I can't think of it.
Maybe at the beginning when he escapes, like right at the very beginning, get it blending in with the baseball crowd, but that would be about it.
Yeah, I mean that Drive is probably the only truly terrifying performance from Albert Brooks. And so speaking of the theater of the mind, something I noticed this time watching, I probably didn't see
Finding Dory.
Yeah. I actually haven't seen Finding Dory, but I get what you're saying. There's something I noticed this watch through is like my fourth or fifth time seeing this movie. He leaves the theater of his mind for a very long stint when he's getting his life back together after he gets out of prison, and re-enters it in this scene where he's back in prison and he's enjoying being an artist now, and he's being what's the word? There's an art teacher who is giving him the attention he needs. And as soon as he hears that that's probably going to be taken away, he's back in his mind palace, talking to people. It's very referential, self-aware. It's a lot of artifice going on here. There's a terribly unreliable narrator, though not as unreliable as Walker. Walker is just flat out lying, whereas Bronson has a different point of view on things, I think is the way I would say it. But yeah, I do think it's interesting that you said something about the aesthetic reminding you of Guy Ritchie, because I was looking at the way Magnolia, who had this movie, Magnolia, sort of advertised this as a brutal gangster movie. And it did okay, so I guess it worked. And I don't remember people complaining like they did about Drive when Drive came out and people are like, I was promised Fast and the Furious, then I got something else. Why give me my money back? And I was looking at the original reviews and people just keep comparing it to Guy Ritchie. And I honestly, other than the high contrast bleach bypass look, I was unsure what they were talking about.
Well, to be clear, I said Guy Ritchie, same neighborhood, just because because you were saying that he played up being a pretty boy, but I don't think that Guy Ritchie is the world of pretty boys. Guy Ritchie is the world of the Lock, Stock, and Two Smoking Barrels and Snatch. And I feel like you can see a Venn diagram that would have Bronson and Rock and Rolla in that sort of, lower class English. I mean, I don't know. It's probably not English.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It's like that's sort of the same world. So I don't think he's doing much. Like I was, it's just in reference to the pretty boy thing. I felt like this has more in common with Bronson than something else.
Yeah, these were all notes I had because I was genuinely kind of confused about it, but that makes sense. And it also makes sense that American critics wouldn't have much of a frame of reference. Like how many of them had seen Long Good Friday or something? Maybe they just didn't have a frame of reference for British.
I do think that, I don't know how you feel about it, but I do feel like the Clockwork Orange thing is all over. I would be more inclined to think of Clockwork Orange than
I mean,
Ritchie.
It doesn't have an aesthetic similar to Clockwork Orange, but there's this sort of like that movie's a retro futurism kind of thing, and this is extra gritty, urban, but the narrative like is very similar. And the way tone, that
namely the tone of the way in which I would call it ironic, that it's like, it's about this, it's sort of like the movie has sort of a operatic beauty to it, but the things that happen in it are a lot darker than that. And so that's the quality that I see, that I think that he evokes, that he pulls from that movie.
Yeah, I mean, well, Kubrick famously uses Beethoven throughout. I mean, when Wendy Carlos synth vocodered the hell out of the Beethoven music, but there's still a whole bunch of Beethoven music in that movie. This one uses Verdi and Wagner in almost the same way. I don't think that there is an original score for Bronson. It's all either Verdi, Wagner, similar classical music, or the like 80s synth music.
I did also think like some of the shooting of, specifically when he goes home after he leaves prison, some of those like bedrooms and apartment like spaces just really reminded me of the same things in Clockwork Orange, just the way that they were shot.
It's not just when he goes home, which is like a really heartbreaking scene where he's like, where's all my stuff? And his adult mother, this is a man in his 30s at this point, it's like, well, we moved, we can't take all your stuff. He wants his childhood bed. It's a very sad scene. But then the scene after that, he goes to see his uncle to look for a job. And he sits at this really surrealistic cocktail party with these weird people. And he has a suitcase on his lap. And it's very similar to the scene in Clockwork Orange where he's been beaten up by his friends who are now cops. And he stumbles into the house, which turns out to be the house of a former victim. And it's the same sort of surrealistic young guy out of prison doesn't know what's happening kind of situation. And I mean, the whole theme about criminal punishment.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, go ahead.
And the delinquency and criminal punishment thing. Like both the movies come to the conclusion that we are not, the British prison system is not serving these people very well. They're not fixing the situation.
And then I was going to say that the obvious like final grace note is, I think the bowler hat that they give him at the end is obviously Clockwork Orange too.
You know, and so something that I made a note for myself that I had never noticed before, and I had made the Clockwork Orange connection like you did, but I realized just a couple scenes prior, the art teacher refers to him as a budding Magritte, and that he ties up the art teacher, gives him a bowler hat, and sticks an apple in his mouth, which is that
Yep.
Magritte painting of people in bowler hats with apples in front of their faces.
Which I mainly recognized because I'm a fan of the Thomas Crown Affair remake.
Oh, right. That does happen in that. Yeah, I just hadn't I mean, I've taken multiple art history lessons, classes. I should have recognized that, but I didn't notice that budding Magritte part. Bronson was somewhat involved. You know, he can't make money off of his story, and Refn didn't want to meet him, apparently, but he and Hardy kind of became friends. How much of a degree as you can become friends, and he really approved of Hardy's performance. He said, you know, he got me perfectly. And one of the more psychotic things he did is he shaved his mustache and sent it to them and said, you can use this to put on Tom Hardy to make him look more like me. I'm like, no, Tom can grow his own mustache. I like this movie. It does feel, it's because it's so episodic, which is another thing that makes it sort of unconventional. It doesn't jump around in time like some unconventional biopics do. It's like a straight line from his childhood to what was then pretty current. And the thing that I like about that is that's the way memory actually works.
Right.
Is when you have a memory, you don't have the entirety of the day in your mind. You have those things that happened. And if someone like him, he would remember the time he got beat up, or he remember the time he got introduced to someone who was going to turn him into a boxer. You know, he spent how long in solitary confinement? I can't remember.
I think it's like something like 20 of 25 years, something like that.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's enough to kill somebody. Like, it's amazing he even has a brain in his head anymore. It didn't turn to goo. But I like the way that is how real memories work. And it makes a sort of chaotic movie, but there's something truthful about it. As much as it can be truthful, and that we don't know how much of the truth is in it. I think Refn did want to do truthful events, even though the narration is off, but and then weird little touches here and there.
Well, I will throw out one moment that I did really like. I don't know if it will lead the conversation anywhere, but I did think it was interesting in the concept of, like, if one of the things that we associate with unconventional biopics is like surrealism, one thing that I did like is, like, there's this scene early on in the movie where he's discussing like how much he likes prison, and he says that like, to me it wasn't like being in prison, and it's this shot of him walking around in a circle in his prison cell. And one of the things that I thought while I was watching that scene is one of these revolutions, it's going to transition into the thing that he's talking about. He's going to just feel like he was at home, and Refn resists doing that, which I thought was interesting.
That's actually the one thing he didn't like about the movie, is that he considers his time in prison very horrible and traumatic, and he wasn't very happy that the movie version of him implies that it's the only place where he's happy. I don't know. It seems like he mostly really enjoyed the movie, and he really enjoyed the process of getting to tell his story.
So I will say that makes this one. Our two previous stories were the ones where the subject was dead. And then that makes this one a movie where the unconventional nature of the movie, it serves the filmmaker's commentary on the subject, but it's not necessarily the way the subject sees themselves. So that might be an interesting thing to think of.
The couple little things to end this section that I have is he's going by Charles Salvador these days, an homage to Salvador Dali. Yep. He's really devoted to his art, and it is interesting art. It's definitely outsider art, but it is interesting stuff. He's raised money for his mom to go on holiday. He raised money for a child with cerebral palsy. The weirdest factoid about him is that there's this much worse biopic where Tom Hardy plays British criminal, the Cray twins, called Legend, which is a terrible movie. title. Why would you call that movie Legend? But the thing that's not in this movie is Bronson actually knows the Krays. He was in prison with them, and he knows them. And Ronnie Kray apparently sold a bunch of Bronson's art for him to pay for his mother's vacation. So that's like this weird Tom Hardy verse of criminals.
He's not in this one, but I have the movie The Krays. I haven't watched it.
It was released almost the same time. It was like the less prestigious of the two Kray brothers.
No, I think the Krays that I have is like, I think it's from like the mid 2000s, and the Legend's like 2010, 2015.
Oh, apparently there's also a 90s one.
Oh, 90s. Maybe that's, yeah, it must be even further back. So that's the one that I have.
Tom Hardy one was 2015.
Tom Hardy one being most famous for that poster where they put the 2-star review between them, and they just,
so it looks like a 4-star review.
They imply that it's like surrounded by 4-star reviews. Yeah.
The last note I have is apparently Jason Statham was originally up for this role, and I am so happy he didn't get it. I really like Jason Statham a lot, but Jesus Christ, it would have been a completely different and much less interesting movie with him in it. It would have just been a gangster movie.
Then it would really be like Guy Ritchie.
Guy Ritchie, exactly. Statham and Ritchie, like they came up together. I would say this actually, more than Guy Ritchie, it actually reminds me more of Danny Boyle. Like I see some of Trainspotting in this spiritually, not necessarily tonally, but like maybe even a little bit tonally. There's just it feels more like if you're going to pick a United Kingdom crime story, I would lean more towards Trainspotting.
Sure. One thing that I did think was interesting that will segue us to the last movie is that I did find that the one thing that was sort of compelling to me, even though I didn't feel like I had enough of a handle on what Bronson's ultimately trying to say about the subject of this character, I did think that it felt a little bit like a yin to the yang of Better Man. Like they have sort of interesting similarities, I guess.
One is about a movie about a person who is incapable of having a character arc, and the other movie is a one long character arc. Is one way to put it. I don't necessarily think the real Charles Salvador is incapable of a character arc, but the character that Tom Hardy's playing is incapable of a character arc, and that's part of his charm, I think.
And I thought they were both, well, because I feel like, again, I didn't really have a totally firm handle on it, but I did think that like the Bronson character talks about being famous a little bit, like throughout the movie, and so that was sort of interesting. And they both have this sort of like maybe if things hadn't worked out for Robbie Williams, like would he have turned into somebody that was a little more like Bronson? Maybe probably not as violent, but sort of similar strata.
Yeah, I don't know enough about England to know how close they grew up next to each other. They're about 15, 20 years apart, but I think that they're similar. I'm not going to look it up, so I could just be wrong. But they seem to have similar upbringings. Well, that's not even true, because Bronson had a good dad. According to all the stuff I read and all stuff he said, his dad was a good father who tried really hard, which is a defining characteristic of Robbie Williams. Yeah. So let's talk about Better Man. Came out in 2024. Robert Williams was born in 1974 in Stoke-on-Trent, England. He was from a middle-class family. He went to St. Margaret Ward Catholic School, where he found a love of performance, participating in school plays. At 16, in the year 1990, he tried out for manager Nigel Martin Smith's new boy band, Take That, ended up being the youngest member of the group. Unfortunately, Robert, newly christened Robbie by Martin Smith, struggled with substance abuse and clashed with his bandmates. He quit the group in 1995, started a solo career, which eventually built in momentum, and he became one of the biggest pop stars in British history, though the substance abuse and mental health problems persisted. This is directed by Michael or Michelle. I honestly don't know. I assume it's Michael Gracey.
Yeah, Michael. I think the regular.
I think I'd seen one of his music videos, but I have never seen... what was it called? The circus movie.
Greatest Showman. He also He also helped design, I believe I haven't seen it yet, but he also helped design the musical sequences in Rocket Man.
Oh yeah, I saw that he was credited for something on Rocket Man, which is a movie I haven't watched because I don't like biopics.
I do think that I came to this just because people were talking about it. When I watched it for the first time, I had basically no idea who Robbie Williams was. I think that a lot of people have discussed the phenomenon of how he is like literally one of the biggest selling pop stars of all time. Amount of number one singles he's had is crazy, and yet he is really just not that known outside of Europe.
Yeah.
In America, he just doesn't have that kind of cultural footprint. But yeah, I just like this movie because I mean the unconventional thing about this one, which anyone who's seen any of the trailers or anything will know, is that he's portrayed by a CGI monkey. I know that he was just friends with Michael Gracey.
It's a CGI chimpanzee. Let's not be ape racist.
I do know that he was friends with Michael Gracey, and he started talking to Michael Gracey about his life story, and eventually Michael Gracey was like, "I think there's a movie here," and I guess in a lot of interviews and stuff that he's given over the years, he's talked about how he feels like a performing monkey sometimes, and so the director went up to him and he's like, "If you could be any animal, what would you be?" And the way Robbie told it was like. At the time, I was trying to build myself up, so I said lion, and he was like, and then he thought about it, monkey, and then that's how they got onto the movie, even though he's a chimpanzee. So,
yeah, and I also knew nothing about his.
Yeah. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say I also knew nothing about. The only thing I knew about him is that he sang with Alex Horn's horn section during COVID. They did a From Their Houses little song, and Christine knew a lot of the songs. We watched it together and she sang along with a whole bunch of the songs. I realized that the mid 90s and the early 2000s, I was the least plugged into pop music during that time. That was when I was in high school and college, and I was only listening to punk rock from the 80s and fucking ska music. So I knew the Spice Girls, and that was about it. And I knew Britney Spears. I worked at a daycare, so I knew Britney Spears and Backstreet. But this was really, really way out of my knowledge zone. I was thinking that that Gracey had done the Pink concert film that I really liked, but he did All I Know So Far, and it turned out the one I really like is The Truth About Love live in Melbourne. That's a fucking cool concert movie if you've never seen it and you like Pink. I didn't think I liked Pink, but apparently I do because I watched that movie.
My feeling about this one is that it's sort of interesting in this regard, in that it's a movie that has an unconventional element running through every single scene, but it is also the most traditional of all the biopics in that it is otherwise pretty much a very straightforward biopic. I mean, I do think that even if the monkey or the chimp is the unconventional element at the heart of every scene, I do think the other thing that makes the movie feel unconventional is it has these incredible, well-designed musical sequences, which are all generally like fantasy, and they have these like great transitions in and out of what is quote-unquote reality and stuff. And so those are the things that really stick out to me. Like, I find those sequences like really well made and really well done.
Well, I'll be honest, and that I thought this was way too long and way too conventional, and I didn't really enjoy it outside of the musical sequences very much.
Which is kind of what I was expecting.
Well, and the musical sequences really do justify its existence. And what I will say, so here's my complaint that I would usually dismiss if someone else said this. But there was a part of me, I think the fact that he's a CG monkey actually does add to the artifice of the whole thing, and does make it, it's not just him, but it makes the whole movie feel kind of artificial. Gracey uses a lot of shallow focus, which helps make the chimp appear more realistic, but also somehow makes the background less realistic. If I don't know how to describe it outside of that, but it's a very stylized film in this way. And there was a little part of me, because I really do like musicals, and there was a little part of the Bubsy Berkeley and Bob Fosse fan of me was a little bit resentful that so many of these scenes, specifically the one in the middle of the movie, which is the full group musical thing where they're going through like Piccadilly Circus, I think it is, and riding mopeds. The CG-ness of it sort of pulled me out, which is something that usually doesn't happen to me. I'm not an anti-CG person, but there was something about when you watch, and again, I would have dismissed exactly what I'm saying here. I want everybody to understand that I also think I'm an asshole right now, but there's something about the truth of these Bubsy Berkeley movies where you get 7,000 people to kick their legs at the same time and pay some poor cameraman to drag the camera before they invented steady cams through these people's legs. And there's just so much effort on scene. That scene, because it felt more cartoonish, it didn't work as well for me.
I think the thing that does bug me a little bit about that scene that I think they could have gotten rid of is the amount of like lens flare in it. I feel like that's a thing that they did to try and make it seem less artificial, and I think it actually has the opposite effect. I mean, I believe that all of the people in the scene are real. I think that computer trickery is that they stitched a bunch of smaller...
Stitched it, yeah. Because it's all one long take, too. And it's one long impossible take. You can't pull it off without stitching stuff together.
So I could be wrong, but I do think that big shot at the end, I mean, at least some of that, I think, is real dancers.
Yeah.
Like a significant portion. It might not be everybody, but I do think that, you know, in terms of getting everybody together, they do have people, and they are in Piccadilly Circus because they shut it down for a night or something like that. But yeah, I do get that. I do think that, yeah, the movie has a very, even though it attempts to look like film, it has a very digital look throughout it. And but yeah, some of the more fantastical sequences, I think, I mean, this is most of the sequences in the movie, but I really love the beginning. I'm trying to remember what the name of that song is. I think it's Feel. Remember. I think it's Feel, and so that's the one where his dad is leaving, and there's this. There's like the shot that I really like is this one where he's in his bedroom and he's got his dad's jacket draped over the chair, and he's like imagining that his dad is there, and as the camera revolves around them, like they're on stage and he's actually there, and he's using a comb as a microphone. It turns into a real microphone, and then by the end of the revolution, it turns back into the bedroom and stuff. So I like that one. My favorite one in the whole movie is Come Undone, which is right after he gets kicked out of the band, and he's
that's my note. That's the best. That scene's the best in the movie. I have a note here. Yeah. Go on.
That was just so good. Like the especially the little interlude in the middle of the song where the music sort of drops out, and he fantasizes because his dad leaves, and the way his dad leaves when he's a kid is he gets on this bus to go with his football team. And so in this middle of the sequence, he's like, the music sort of drops out and he's driving next to that bus and he's seeing his dad on the bus, like, and then the car goes into the water and stuff. And there's this great swarm of fans that are like thrashing around him in the water, like they're sharks, like after blood. And then there's, he gets surrounded by photographers and stuff. And then I think the other one that is really good is right after that, is on the boat. He meets this other pop star who he gets into a relationship with, and that one's really good too. And I can't remember the name of that song either, but it's like about their relationship and about how she gets pregnant, but her management forces her to have a abortion in order to stick to her career and stuff. And so that's the Karen Carpenter, her Karen Carpenter moment.
But yeah, the scene when he's driving the car. And that is a case where the artificiality and the CG-ness and the sort of animated quality works so good. Like that was me going, maybe I'm messing up by not enjoying this more than I am, because this scene it reminds me of like a really great animated sequence. And so does the one you described, made me think of something like, I can't think of an example off the top of my head, but I swear there's like a Pixar movie that has the same kind of action where someone's imagining something and then by the end of a camera rotation, it goes back to what's really happening.
That sounds vaguely familiar.
It also kind of reminds me of Goofy movie in a weird way, even though that's about a good dad. But when this movie's good, it is good because it's like an animated musical, I think. And I think part of my problem specifically is that you're not supposed to like him for most of this movie. He's
Sure.
a prick. But I kept on feeling like because Robbie Robertson was involved, Robbie Robertson. That's a different musician. Robbie Williams. Robbie Robertson is from the band. He was a different kind of dickhead. Fuck Robbie Robertson. He passed away recently. Because Robbie Williams was involved, I feel like there's always a little bit of armor up. So there's this scene where he has a breakdown with his girlfriend, and the subtext of the scene is that he's jealous because she has a #1 hit and he doesn't, and he feels like he's not worth anything, and so he's going to do the classic person with self-esteem issue thing and push everybody away before they can push him away. But the other context of the scene is that he was just hanging out with Oasis, and it's sort of like Oasis's shitty attitudes rubbed off on him and made him do that. It was, I don't know if I you don't have to agree with me there, but that was part of me like it kind of feels like he's shifting blame to Oasis here when he did this really awful thing. Like he's like just a little bit of like, yeah, I did a bad thing, but also, I was hanging out with Oasis all day or all night. I did not. I was genuinely shocked that she ends up with what's his name from Oasis, because that is a true thing that happened. She was married to what's his name for a while. I can't remember their names. Noel Gallagher, yeah.
The only other thing that I was going to point out that I think is really impressive that you almost don't even notice is that Williams narrates the movie and some other guy plays him through the whole movie, and it just feels like a single performance.
Yeah, I'm not clear on if Williams did any of his own singing. I was under the impression he did some of it, but not all of it.
No, he did. It's all him singing, but okay. The mocap and the vocal performance of Robbie throughout the whole movie is somebody else.
Who looks shockingly like a young Robbie Williams. I saw the guy's picture, and I was a little bit, I was like, wow, he could just play actual Robbie Williams in something. His name was John O'Davis or Davies.
Yes. I was trying to remember, and I kept getting confused with the guy who plays Chewbacca now, Jonas Sutoma.
Oh, so, yeah. Another thing that I think is another me problem is I think that I figured out watching this movie that part of the issue I have with biopics about real life artists, and even not even just real life artists, like artists in general, is that it's really hard to tell a story about an artist without a touch of objectivism. There's always going to be a dash of Ayn Rand in a story about someone who is so important as an artist that he transcends he or she transcends the issues that they're creating around them. And I think that's less a problem with this movie or even biopics in general, and more a problem with just the way we treat pop stars. And I feel like that was a sort of resentment in the back of my brain that might actually be part of the reason why I don't like these movies. And so I'm going to try to work on that.
I mean,
I don't currently have a therapist, but I'll tell one about it once I get one.
One thing that was, I guess, interesting to me is that this is also, it's sort of in the vein of All That Jazz, where it's kind of a self-flagellating a little bit. Like it is, he is very aware of his own shortcomings, and he's sort of like accepting them and stuff. So that's an interesting quality to it as well. I do understand that there's a friction there with the unconventional nature of the biopic, that he's so self-aware and that he's not going to pull some of those punches, but then the structure of the movie is so traditional that it does feel like I wish that part of it was a little bit more edgy like the other.
Yeah, I mean, there's also a part of me that is just tired of stories about people with daddy issues. But I have to recognize that that's a trope for a reason. People have abusive fathers. Because I didn't have an abusive father.
I thought this was interesting in that he wasn't abusive, and he was around, so he was kind of just like sort of shitty, It's sort of interesting.
I think he was a form of abuse. He wasn't physically abusive, but I think he was emotionally abusive. His dad was played by Steve Pemberton, who was on Taskmaster, which is like my favorite show. So I was like, why do I know this guy? And I couldn't recognize him because he had a wig on. I could imagine the "Let Me Entertain You" scene working really well on a big screen. That was one thing I was thinking to myself, is like, I'm not getting the whole. Was this in IMAX?
I don't know.
It might have been in Europe, but not America, I bet. I can see this, like all musicals that are well done. The big screen actually helps them, because you feel like you're watching a show.
I do like that part of the movie, the whole being surrounded by other versions of himself, which is something,
Yeah, that was
like,
cool.
throughout history, especially because that is a thing that is sort of, the use of that is facilitated or made easier by the fact that he's played by a CGI chimp, because then you don't need to have all these different actors portraying him at all these ages and stuff.
Yeah,
And it can be this one thing. I really like the little touch of making his whole fur white when he's got beach
yeah.
blonde hair. Really funny.
I was expecting when he shaved his head for his whole body to be shaved, but they didn't go that far.
And they do a good job of working in like little bits of his iconography. Like, a lot of people remember the bizarre rock DJ music video where he starts to strip, and then eventually he gets done stripping and he starts taking off his skin, and that's why there's a skinned monkey skin chimp in that "Let Me Entertain You" sequence. That great battle royale between him and all the other versions of himself.
Yeah, that was just a cool scene in general. And it was another thing is that it's very good that this movie was rated R. I think that a PG-13 version of this story would just be too much. It would feel very sanitized and silly. And the fact that, not only do you have curse words, but you have like real serious drug use, and you have these super violent battle scenes that are, not necessary to the story necessarily, but are super necessary to the feel of it. Yeah, you wouldn't have gotten that if you went with a PG-13. The thing I was mentioning earlier is I thought it was very funny that this movie ends with him singing "My Way," because part of me felt like Alex Cox ruined any non-ironic use of that song when he used it in Sid and Nancy. Like, you can't use "My Way" without irony anymore because of what Alex Cox did. But apparently you can. I was wrong. and I'm not even holding it against him. I mean, like, it genuinely did work in an unironic way.
That was the one scene where Williams actually did the mocap for that scene.
Oh, he was a little older in that scene.
Like at the beginning of the production, he was considering doing the mocap, but he would have had to move and be away from his family. So that's why they gave it to another actor.
Right, that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, I didn't love it, but I didn't think it was a bad movie. It just wasn't quite for me, I think, is what I'd come down to. It wasn't like, there's a lot of like Walk the Line as a movie I watched, and I'm like, why? I don't get it. It just does not compute to me. And Ray was another movie, just does not compute to me. I like, why? I would rather watch so many other things.
Just for that, it raises a good question, which is, other than, I guess, you said Malcolm X. I was going to say, what is the most traditional biopic you do like?
Does The Right Stuff count? Is it a multi-person biopic? I love The Right Stuff.
I mean, I guess that sounds like, I haven't seen The Right Stuff yet. I think I told you that, but it sounds like the kind of movie that is kind of like more in the tradition of Normal Ray, where it's about an event rather than a person.
Kind of looking at the shelf, and we already established Dog Day Afternoon doesn't really fit.
Even JFK would be about a person, and it's like, of course,
I actually kind of like JFK, and I'm not a very big Oliver Stone fan.
Oh, JFK! I think JFK is great. I mean,
I like Nixon too.
And JFK is one of those movies where it's like, I don't care if it's bullshit. Like, it's just, the movie is entertaining. Like,
right. And at the same time, I think The Doors is awful. I think it's a dreadful movie.
Sure.
I absolutely hate that movie. And it's not Val Kilmer's fault. Val Kilmer's great. And all the actors are fine. It's just a dreadful movie.
Whereas on the other hand, I have my bugaboo about how Zodiac is not true to the real story. And that annoys me.
Yeah, and that's a great movie that I try not to take too seriously, yeah.
The only reason, I think, to me, people don't understand when I complain about Zodiac, because it's like, no movie that's based on reality is really that true. They all make lots of concessions to make a drama. The reason it bugs me is because, like, I felt like Fincher just made such a big deal about how they looked at all the actual case files and stuff, and then they changed things that made Jake Gyllenhaal's character more correct, even though what the movie's building to is Mark Ruffalo saying that's not enough. So to me, it's confusing because it's like if he actually punctured the real holes that are in this guy's theory, that would
Yeah.
serve the same purpose. I don't understand why they made him more right in a way that's not true. That kind of thing.
Yeah, I understand. It's just, I think that when you said bugaboo, it's like me with other things. It's just something that I get and I don't feel the same way, but I'm not going to, I would not be defensive about that. Yeah, I'm trying to think of other biopics I really like. I mean, a lot of them are like not really biopics. Like The Harder They Come is based on true things that happened, but is not really a biopic. It's sort of like a mix of several different people's stories, which were all sort of legends anyway at that point. Is Buckaroo Banzai a biopic? Sure. Buckaroo Banzai Across the Eighth Dimension. That's my favorite biopic.
I think in some ways you might be able to call Malcolm X a little bit unconventional, and then I do feel like it focuses on a lot of stuff that I feel like the other biopics would probably, like another biopic about Malcolm X would probably put like very condensed up front and skip over. And then they would spend more time on the part that the movie that Spike doesn't spend as much time on.
Yeah, especially his early life.
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Yeah, agreed. Okay, well, Tyler, where can the people find you in the world of the internet?
Unfortunately, I'm still on Twitter. So you can find me on Twitter at Tyler Gill Foster. And I write for your website. So you can find me at Genre Grinder.
That's right. I always make sure he's labeled as Tyler Foster. I'll share them on my Blue Sky, which is at Gabe Powers, one word. And my letterbox is also Gabe Powers, one word. And,
you can find me on Letterboxd too. And
what are you in there? Tyler G. Foster?
Yeah, Tyler G. Foster.
Okay.
Which I would be on Twitter if some guy hadn't taken it. And he doesn't even tweet. I keep hoping his account will be like that he'll be, because they say that after a certain amount of time of inactivity that it resets, but I've never seen that. So,
well, the reason I got to be just Gabe Powers is because you gave me a invitation to Blue Sky before it was public, so I was the first Gabe Powers. I'm like the 27th Gabe Powers on Twitter when I was on Twitter. I'm still selling the shirts. I'll try to make a new shirt to raise more money for gender justice here in the Twin Cities, and until next time, I forgot to write one again. Until next time, try to live a life that doesn't end with Todd Haynes reenacting it with Barbie dolls. Good night.
And I'm on top of the